What's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we'll be talking about the Bitcoin price chart, like we typically do, along with the Russell 2000 and the altcoin market, coming off of a little bit of a downward move happening here overnight, as XRP caught a little bit of a pump back here into the broken support level, only for it to take it back throughout the evening. If you caught yesterday's video, I talked about how it's such a make or break moment happening here in the market, especially with the altcoin market back at the all-time high, along with the Russell 2000 back at the all-time high, as we all sit here fingernail biting, wondering, is this thing going to actually break out? I've had a couple of different lines sitting here on the Russell 2000 chart, indicating the November of 2024 high, the 2021 all-time high, the highest close there in November of 2024, and then the highest close here of 2021. You can see while we are in pre-market this morning, we are slipped down below them. However, no real technical breaks have happened in here yet, but we are slipping back down below. Of course, we do cover the Russell 2000 in depth, especially in the environment that we're in right now, due to this correlation that happens here in the crypto market and the equity market with Bitcoin and the major indexes and the altcoin market and the Russell 2000. And it's been this big moment of whether or not that Russell is going to be able to break out and take the altcoin market with it. In yesterday's video, I presented really a lot of like mixed things you could look at, right? The picture over here on Bitcoin really isn't super clear. I could personally draw out several different scenarios. And if you're drawing out several different scenarios, what does that really mean? It means you don't really have a lot of conviction in whichever one will happen, which I've expressed. I don't have strong conviction on what the next move for Bitcoin will be. I could come on here and present that, hey, we've just back tested the previous high. We're just building some forms in here to go shoot off and do a parabola and finish this thing off. Also, there's an idea that we could just be working on an ABC correction happening in here, where we hit back to the 618, back below the 236, and then back up to the 702, and then prices tumble over. Or you could even argue being somewhere like there, and that back test over here has been like this, and it's just going to kind of roll over and head on down. Now, what's the problem with doing all of that and presenting those three scenarios? That's up, sideways, and down, right? The classic YouTuber TA hedge call to where you get it right no matter what, right? All scenarios presented, one of them is going to be right. But when you zoom out on the context of the actual discussion that's happening in here, what is it actually talking about? It's talking about like a final ending parabola happening in here, and that being the actual end of the cycle, or we're talking about an ABC correction and that being the end of the cycle, or we're talking about being in here and this being the actual end of the cycle. Either one of them being the end of the cycle on the bigger context of looking at it through this lens that we've been talking about, that everything we've seen in here is like being into the final kind of moment of a cycle here for Bitcoin. And that we've really done all the phases to go ahead and get our way up in here to reach the big correction we just had last year, heading into the summer right in here. And then now just kind of trying to work that out, right? So I get it. We're talking about up, down, sideways, but the bigger context, of course, is looking at it through this particular lens. And whether or not there is just kind of one more push up to happen in here, or if we're already just well beyond that moment, right? It's a really tough call. And things that we know about this market is there's just this strong correlation to these equity markets. And the thing we keep focusing on is to say, hey, that Russell's got to be able to get out of there, right? In order for the altcoins to be able to take control. And we've been sitting here for a week saying, hey, are we going to get out? Are we going to get out? And yesterday's close was a little bit of a pullback on the daily close, losing a couple of them, but still maintaining the 2021 all-time high close. And there's still plenty of time for this thing to be able to shoot its way back up and get above there, since we're still just in pre-market. But as we sit here in this intense situation, you're left with a couple of thoughts, right? Like, well, if it pulls back really hard, if it goes sideways, if it breaks out, how do you handle any of those types of things? And for me, it's been, waiting until September, waiting until we got past September 19th for everything to be in long-term capital gains. And somebody asked me in markets in the morning, if XRP does break down below here, below these levels, right? And then we're not looking like an ABC and we start doing things like this in here, right? Would you start selling some XRP? And the idea was, well, yeah, I'd kind of have no choice. But of course, what always stinks about that? Well, it stinks because you're selling at a low, right? And when you sell at a low, what are you always at risk of? You're at risk of a liquidity sweep coming in here and then it turning its way back up on you. And you just got totally annihilated at the low. I doubt that would happen if we do break through. It does set up the stage for it to really kind of take a longer time. but that risk is always there whenever you do sweep lows. And so as we've gotten into September and we've gotten into my long-term capital gains tax status, we've gotten into this really big world of unknown on how Bitcoin's little structure is going to play out right in here. And we still continue this fight here with the altcoin market and continued this fight over here with the Russell 2000. Became apparent to me, what do you do in a situation where it's a make or break moment? There's a lot of different things that could transpire right in here. If you don't have pure full conviction on which one's going to end up occurring in here, sounds like the perfect time to play some defense. So I posted over here on X yesterday that I'm taking a defensive position right now with a third of my crypto portfolio until we can get evidence of this thing to bust out of here for the Russell 2000 and for Total 2. Now, I think about these things for a while before I post them because I've been here for quite a while. This is my almost 6-year anniversary coming up here in November of being in the crypto market and being on Twitter and being on YouTube. So I know when these posts get made, there's a lot of rabble that ends up happening, but it's got to be clear that it's not like I'm calling a top, right? If you're calling a top with only a third of your portfolio, that stinks. I mean, there's always the risk of that happening in here, but if I genuinely thought this was actually a top, I would probably do quite a bit more. But anyway, I wrote, as the market continues to struggle to see Total 2 and the Russell 2000 break out, I've decided to take a defensive play. I'm actively selling 1/3 of my entire crypto holdings until the market proves it can escape. In today's video, or yesterday's video, I expressed how it's such a make or break moment where the market is. This is the escape zone or the rejection zone. It's the all-time high battle where markets turn euphoric and exciting or horrifyingly ugly. There are several bull cases and several bear cases, which I presented in yesterday's video, but the market needs to prove itself from here. As we've finally reached September, it has been a month I always intended to take some profits in. I talked about it for months leading up to it. I make a lot of charts, but I'm not a day trader. September 19th was the date that 95% of my crypto holdings reached long-term capital gains tax status, which means I've held 95% of my crypto for over a year. It was a date I anxiously awaited for, frequently thinking, can it get here any faster? And we just so happened to be at major resistance points and inflection levels at the same time, making it technically appropriate as well. I rarely make trades, so this is a big deal for me. The last time I publicly did major sells was in March and April of 2024. But with the market waddling here, unable to decide, I'm left with this overwhelming feeling that I'm gambling by doing nothing and hoping and wishing for it to break out. I don't like that feeling, and it feels like the right decision for me to de-risk some and await for it to break out, and then reassess entries into coins I'm passionate about, rather than this laundry list of things I own, but to be able to enter more precisely into the ones I really want if the breakout comes, right? So the idea of that is being that, look where we are, right? We're back at the all-time high right in here for the Russell 2000. We're right back at the all-time high for Total 2. This is a technical major resistance level happening in here, and unknown how hard it could pull back from here before trying to take another stab at it, or if it's just going to do it straight from here right now. The same thing goes with the Russell 2000, that it's right back at the major resistance level, unknown if it's going to have to pull back a little bit deeper or just go straight on out. We know that the correlation of these two things matter because they've unequivocally proven that for years on end. So what I opted to do was get 1/3 into cash as we await for this decision to make itself present. If the Russell 2000 busts out of here, well, guess what? I'll be able to enter more precisely into the ones I really want if the breakout comes. You shouldn't rely on my choice of coins, as I just go based on data of user activity, social engagement, percentage drawdowns, and developer activity, but I don't mind sharing them with you. The coins that interest me in the event of a breakout into all-time highs are XRP, SWI, Ethereum, Chainlink, Cardano, and Solana. No small cap gems at 100x, sorry. Just simple boomer stuff, and no promises that they'll do anything. Been here long enough to know that when you do something like that on X, he's capitulating. No, right? These moves were made right here. And where we're at right now is that the market is up a whopping 275% off the lows, and essentially just de-risking 1/3 to make it prove that it's going to get that last 10%. Essentially taking a third here, and then if we get the breakout here, go for it. And the story is the same over here. Get the breakout, go for it. This is a hard concept for a lot of people to understand, to be able to ride something all the way up and ride something all the way up. And then when you get to a major resistance level, taking a little bit of action just for precautionary sake. Now, if I had the conviction to come on here and say, I believe the top is in, I want to be the top caller, I want to be the guy that when everything goes gloom and doom for the next year, everybody's looking at me saying, hey, he called it. Yep, he did. I mean, if I really thought that, I would do it, but I don't. I think there's a very reasonable chance that the Russell 2000 is going to bust out of here and that Total 2 is going to bust out of here. But it's a perfect defense play, in my opinion. Fortunately, I was able to catch it into the little rally that happened yesterday. Same thing goes for XRP into that little rally between 297 and 299. But don't be fooled. In the event that the Russell breaks and that Total 2 breaks, I've got my laundry list ready to go. I also mentioned in here that I broadly went through my portfolio and reduced without favoring anything, not as a restructuring for a bear, which, like I just said, which of course could come, but just as a risk reduction in this environment of uncertainty while the market makes its decision. If we get the breakout in the Russell and Total 2, I have no problem flushing cash right back in to ride a breakout. It's merely 3% away for the Russell 2000 and 9% away for the altcoin market. But I know this is the right decision for me with the level it is at and the timing of where we are in September. Some coins I took major gains on, some I took losses, but in the end, my portfolio is near record highs after being in this market for 8+ years, and it feels appropriate. Hopefully in a week from now, I'm quote tweeting this and saying blasted cash back in, but till then, it's a waiting game for the market to dish out its cards. And that's just where we're at right now, waiting for that thing to prove itself. And it would not shock me in the least bit that today, being September 25th, it's Thursday, tomorrow's Friday, it's a weekly close, right? This thing turns itself back up. Then we go into Monday, and then we go into Tuesday, and Tuesday's the monthly close, and Tuesday's also the quarterly close, so Q3 would be over, and that the quarterly candle somehow closes itself into a new all-time high. And then guess what? We now have weekly closes, monthly closes, quarterly closes into brand new all-time highs. Everything's all great and gravy. My suspicion is the altcoin market would follow it along, and off and away we go as if it was a non-event. However, with us being right here and being on the struggle bus back at the high, just a little bit of defense being played right now until it can prove itself. I always feel like I have to calm nerves sometimes because people lose their absolute mind on X. But, you know, I do realize most people are rational and understanding. But I've tried to explain it so that people do understand. And I think it's completely rational and reasonable with where we are at right now and where we are at right now, to see if we're going to be able to get that last 10% to bust its way out of here. And for people who don't watch markets very closely, this may sound crazy, right? Or they may not have the ideology that I do, that I monitor the stock market, I monitor that correlation between the asset classes, that this is one big tied together event happening in here. And I'm paying attention to this stuff every single day. So when I'm looking at it thinking, okay, well, I'm taking action right here just to be precautionary in case we struggle here at these levels. But I'm like watching it every single day, right? Like if this thing busts out of here, I know, okay, wait a minute, things have now changed. The image has changed for this market. Things just got a whole lot more favorable. I know that I'm like living in the day-to-day moments right now. If that happens, that I can make adjustments at that time. That's also why I can make adjustments right here. And maybe people don't view it as something that makes a whole lot of sense because they're not paying attention to it at the level that I am. But these are the ideas, right? We're back at these highs for the Russell. We're back at the highs for Total 2. A little bit of defense happening right here. Waiting to see a move show up and for a bust out to happen in both of these things for both Total 2 and for the Russell. And barring that we do get it, it would seem very likely we would be entering into finally that euphoric phase where the crowd comes back in. Because I've said this too, right? Like the crowd is not here. That's what, of course, makes it a little odd, right? Like to do something like this, play a defensive play here when the crowd isn't here. It's not like there's irrational exuberance. And that's why we're not talking about it being like, well, calling a top or something like that, because you don't have those actual behaviors of what a top looks like where the crowd is euphoric. That's an element that's missing, right? We talk about the bull cases, talk about the bear cases. The bull case would be that the crowd isn't here. So I do view this as a defensive play at the highs. I don't view this as calling the top or selling the top. At least I'm not hoping that it is, because only 1/3 is not enough protection for it being the absolute top. But there's a little bit of protection there in the event that there is a big struggle bust that happens here. So there's the rationale behind it. It should make logical sense to critical thinkers. And we'll just wait for this market to dish out its hand over the coming days and into next week as we get the weekly, monthly, and quarterly closes to see if we're going to regain ourselves. Because as we can see, we are on a little bit of a struggle here this morning for the Russell 2000. And so obviously we spent a lot of time talking about this and the rationale behind this defensive move that's happening here, because I don't make very many moves in this market. It is very rare for it to happen. Like I'm talking about everything being in long-term capital gains. If I make a decision, it's usually pretty rare. I'm not doing it very often. I want to explain it. It opens up the door to criticism, but I figure if I tell you what I'm doing and explain it to you in the thick of the moment, I assume that you'll find more value in that than me coming back later and saying, oh, by the way, I sold that top. So there you go. That's my plan. That's how I'm treating it right now, and we'll see how things transpire, but I'm ready for either one. I'm ready to rock. So, all right. That's going to be it for this one, guys. Of course, it's a super mega critical mega break moment where we're at right now. We sit back at these highs and we await for the price action to manifest itself. So, all right, you guys can check out the newsletter over here at blockchainbacker.substack.com. This is where I do long form write-ups and I do audio recordings of them where I discuss them and go through the charts at the same time. So I'll read the newsletter to you and discuss the charts. It's got a 43-minute audio recording with the most recent one published over here at blockchainbacker.substack.com. There's a link within the description of this video to the newsletter at blockchainbacker.substack.com. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll check in with you tomorrow. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice, and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.